Hello, and thank you for choosing Right CNC. Today we're going to be talking about the MyPlasm CNC system that's available on the Right CNC New Light Industrial series. This is a new board that we use in our control system, and that comes with this wonderful new software. This video is specifically going to talk about the user interface, where you're going to find a lot of things in this program, as well as things to watch out for as you're initially getting started. Later on, we'll talk about bringing parts into the program and then turning those into cut files for us. So let's go ahead and break right in. Now, this software is going to be updated frequently. This company that produces MyPlasm CNC control software has actually just added another feature for their, it's a CAD generation program that they've added to the software package, and we're going to be doing more updates to these videos as these new features come out. Right now we're at version 1.0.7a, and you'll see those updates as we go along. So when you look at the screen initially, we see we have sort of two sections here. We have a control side, and then we have sort of a working area or display side. So right over here is your working or display area here. This is where you'll have your CAD files that are ready to be, this is your cut path, and this is where you'll see the machine simulate your cut. And this is where you'll be able to manipulate and look and adjust where your torch is in relation to your part. And we'll break into that a little later on. But what you do need to know that this right here, this screen will show you your cut file, as well as the parts of your cut file, like this little hook here called a lead in and a lead out. And it'll also show you where your torch is, and right now it's telling us that the torch is at the bottom left hand corner of this particular part. You can move around the screen and move the object around on the screen by clicking on the working area and then moving your mouse around while holding down that button. And you'll notice a little tiny dialog come up here. Double click to resize, and then we'll go ahead and do that here. And then right mouse button click for project move. So there's a lot of little tiny visual cues that they give you in order to make sure that you're actually using the program properly, which I find extremely useful, and that's one of the reasons we went with this software. Now we have up here in this top right hand corner what I would call the settings and base software control. So right here we have USB device not found. That means that this system isn't plugged into a table currently. Now if your computer was plugged into the your control box and it was trying to run the table and this was popping up, you do want to click to reset, and it will attempt to connect to that USB controller inside of our control box. And if you still get this error, there may be something wrong if you can't get it to connect. I always check the USB, but you'll see that here. You also have here, which is your base setting, and it gives you things like what is your voltage calibration? Do you have a plasma interface? What is your height of transfer? What is your THC speed? Now we're going to give you all of this information initially with your system. There is actually a little download packet that allows us to set a configuration file for this entire system. So you won't have to set all of this up initially yourself. A lot of this will just be imported and controlled from our end here. So keep that in mind. A lot of this you're not going to need to know verbatim. If you want, you can take notes on this screen. However, we will actually be sending out updates and upgrades to the actual base profile that we use to control the system to give you the most accurate running for your table. So we have this here, and we also have the option for a gamepad interface coming later. All right, and here is the machine. This is some more information on the base parameters of the machine. This comes into the accuracy and the control and how the computer is going to translate your file into specific motions and what is regulating those motions. You'll see all of that here, and then we have other functions here like parking, and again we'll show you in another video how that is and where that is. And this is also a way to test your system, test your z-axis. So all of this is all a part of the settings of the system, the base settings there. Okay, so you'll see that in another video. You'll also have a manual listed here and a little bit of about and an exit function here. So there you go. That is the top right-hand corner. You'll also notice on this working area, I'll bring it up here, we have online and offline simulation. If there are any error codes generated by the system, they're all going to appear up here in the top left-hand corner. And you'll also notice that as I move my mouse across this screen, it's giving us relative X and Y coordinates. You can use that for your reference as you're moving around the screen. You know, it's one of those things where should you want to do that, most of the time you're going to be doing all of your motion and all of your control from this left-hand side and not strictly from the mouse. However, as we go further on, we're going to know that with the mouse, we can actually do some really cool stop and restart in the middle of functions just by clicking on an area. But that's for another video. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about the left-hand side of the screen here. Here are our cutting parameters: your primary cutting speed, your cutting speed for corners, your cutting height, your cutting voltage, and then you have your pierce height, pierce time, and floating height, as well as you have a couple of different settings here listed for different parameters based off of materials, and you can save parameters into the system for use on different thicknesses of material. So you don't have to remember it and retain that every single time. You don't have to adjust this every single time. They have parameters down here for you. Right up here we have our motion. Now typically you can use the keyboard for all of this, but you can also just hit these buttons here for your y-axis, your x-axis, and then your diagonal motions. These green buttons here, this up and down, is your z-axis position. And then we have these key buttons right here. This is z-axis 0. This allows the system to zero out the z-axis. We also have the reference home for x, y, and z. This will set the total table 0. This will also allow us to have something called soft limits, which is also present in the program. It's a redundancy. It makes sure that we don't end up running the table into itself along some other part of the table. So just keep that in mind, reference X, Y, and Z. And then we have a reference X, Y, that's just homing the X and Y. And then lastly, we have referencing of the Z. And that is the basics of the control. Now we can set here, this is what we call project position. This allows us to set different points on our material. This will allow us to say, hey, you know what, where the torch is right now is going to be the bottom left hand of this cut, and so it's going to go ahead and keep that there and set up the entire project based off of us clicking on this bottom point here, and that sets the 0 for the cut, and we'll see that in another video. In order to run through our cut, we have these functions here. This is a stop, play, rewind forward, I guess. Yep, rewind forward is probably the best way. Go forward into the path or go backwards into the path. This just allows us to start and stop and move through our cut with these buttons. Again, more often than not, you're not actually going to be using these buttons. You'll be using other buttons in the system in order to manipulate where you're going to start from. However, these are good buttons to have and use. Next here is the DRO, the digital readout for the XYZ position for the system, as well as for the cut. And it has both of those here. This is a machine. This is the for the cut here. And then we have right here, this is where we would import a file, and this is their new CAD feature. We're going to go into that later, and we'll also show you how to import files here. But when it comes to importing a file, that's going to be your button, and you can also save your files here and then open other project files that you've done before. So here is the basic of the screen. Let's go ahead and watch another video that walks us through how to work with and how to import our first part.